Welcome to this edition of Windows and Mirrors. Today, we are going to be talking with an undergraduate student from Delano, California about his journey to Cal and how he's been able to leverage his educational experiences to assist the undocumented community in his hometown.
I came to UC Berkeley in 2014, right after high school, which isn't very common among my peers where I'm from Delano, California, where about 10 of us went to UCs, one of us went to Yale, and everyone else went to the feeder Cal State University of Bakersfield or Bakersfield College, another feeder community college. I chose UC Berkeley because there were a lot of folks who were telling me that there would be more opportunities offered, and given that my parents have sacrificed a lot for me throughout their lives, I thought I would sacrifice my efforts and time coming to this campus, and I've enjoyed it so far. It's been a great experience in the classroom and outside the classroom, but at the same time I still am conscientious of the folks who didn't have the opportunity that I had. Many of whom I went to high school are now parents, whether they be toddlers or 4-year-olds, and it's something I see all the time on social media or when I go back to Delano. But I would do it all over again if I had to choose between UC Berkeley or any other campus. UC Berkeley and Berkeley in general have helped me develop into a person that I didn't see myself becoming, but I'm proud that I've become. So after the Trump election in November, there was great sense of urgency revolving on what one could do personally to help those marginalized even further because of the divisive rhetoric that the new president of the United States incorporated into his campaign. One of the major issues was the rescinding of DACA, which was a big threat at the time, but also major deportations. So a group of us started forming outside the campus, and we were known as Children of Immigrants, because while we come from mixed status families, we don't necessarily suffer from the same fear as students who are undocumented, and we want to do what we could in our capacity without co-opting their movement. One of the few ideas that came about was offering Know Your Rights workshops. There was a lot of accessibility to folks who could teach us. At the time, there was a lawyer who was an immigrant herself, but she became naturalized over time, and she wanted to help us in our endeavor. So she provided us Know Your Rights training, and she allowed us to practice at the East Bay Community Law Center here in Berkeley. And at the time, I really felt worried for folks where I'm from. Again, this is a small population, about 50,000. A majority work in the fields, either with grapes, with oranges, with almonds, and most importantly, most of these folks are undocumented because of the light regulation of E-Verify. So I wanted to do something. I went to churches, I went to Main Street, I went to major sources of people like Walmart, restaurants. I practiced my Spanish publicly for the first time. I spoke to groups of like 400 at church, and this was a very growing experience because I saw the need for lawyers in the area. We have a few lawyers, but they're usually white and private. We don't necessarily have nonprofit organizations that focus on social justice issues. This really touched me because they were coming up with questions as if I was a lawyer, and this made me go back again when DACA was indeed rescinded, or threatened to be rescinded, but on a more official scale. I went to Delano shortly after, I think September 9th, when it was announced on September 5th that it would be rescinded. I really wanted to go because although there was little people could do, there's an assumption that social media can reach everyone and that disinformation regarding the ending of DACA could reach everyone. But being someone of the area, I knew that a lot of folks who are affected don't really use social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or whatever other source of news that's often relied on. And I had more limited time, but indeed folks did show up, and they reinforced my assumption that people really don't know about what's possible and what's not possible with the impending end of DACA. And it's really helpful for folks to explain what they read, because there's a difference between reading and comprehension, and there's lacking of the latter.
You talked about how the organization you worked with was, children of immigrants, so there's the issue of mixed status families. So do you have any experiences that show what the difference is for daily life of someone who has legal status in this country versus someone who has to live in fear of deportation, and the different freedoms that, affords you?
I think this is really relevant, especially today, because as of a few days ago, the Department of Homeland Security is publicly saying that they will look into the social media accounts of immigrants, and this limits free speech to someone privileged like me in a position of citizenship. So I don't have to worry necessarily about being deported when I protest or demonstrate, in terms of having in-state tuition compared to out-state tuition. For Californians, it's different because they qualify for in-state tuition, but in other states, it's not the case. Also, there are more socioeconomic barriers that undocumented students have to face compared to myself. In a general sense, I am very privileged compared to someone who has no legal status, whether they have DACA or not. And I feel very fortunate to be a citizen in this country, even though this country has constantly oppressed folks of my status, even as a legal resident and citizen. But, grateful for the opportunity to be in the land of the free.
And then maybe finally, you said most of the folks that you went to high school with didn't end up going to a four-year institution, either went to a community college or maybe went to a CSU and didn't make it through 4 years. So for you, coming to a place like Berkeley that is very academically rigorous, even for students who've had hugely competitive academic environments, how do you make the transition, and what sort of resources did you use in order to make yourself comfortable with and able to keep up with the rigor of a Berkeley education?
So growing up, you had this idea of going to college. I had the idea of going to college because of my parents constantly pressuring me to get good grades. So I was, again, in that sense, I felt very fortunate that I had that constant support and reminder that where you are right now is not where you'll end up, and going into college is the same mentality. Where I'm at right now is not where I'll end up. It's always focusing on the next step as to where you're going. I think the humanities major wasn't as difficult as compared to other classes that I took. That wasn't really a hard transition. The hard transition was computer science and math and these other STEM classes for a cognitive science major. That really made me feel unprepared compared to when I first came, where it's just the same thing, essays, reading, nothing too drastic. But yeah, overall, I think my mentality of focusing on what you want to do with your life rather than how hard it is at the moment really kept me going. But at the same time, it wasn't no surprise to me getting into college, even though for my background, being first generation, Latino, low income, it's unexpected. I think I was very sheltered in that manner, and that led me to my naive ignorance of the difficulties that I've somewhat experienced, but not to a degree as other people of my background.
Thank you for tuning in today, and we hope you'll join us again next time on Windows and Mirrors. Goodbye for now, and go Bears.